Hey, what's up? I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I'm excited to share my journey through language and the development of my own language through early elementary, junior high, middle school, high school, college, and then do a full circle back to me as a teacher in the language I use. I hope you enjoy.
I'm thinking about my journey with language and how it relates to early elementary education. I found that this quote from Fairclough stuck out pretty well. Language is a part of society and not somehow external to it. Secondly, that language is a societal practice. And thirdly, that language is a social conditioned process that is socially conditioned by others. I remember in elementary school that my teachers and classmates had a big impact on the way I decided to speak as a child. For the most part, since swearing wasn't allowed in my house and I come from a Mormon community, as most schools in Utah are, swearing in early elementary isn't very big or common. So swearing didn't take place, but the words I did use, I still swore, but it would be like dang it or gosh darn or shoot. And my mom would still yell at me sometimes for using those words, but they were the words I had to supplement because I didn't have the power to choose the vocabulary I wanted to use at that age. Along with that, in school, there's a lot of forced vocabulary, so things saying like, may I use the restroom, is an instance of a teacher implementing power rules around vocabulary to make students speak a certain way that they deem right or appropriate. The next thing I can remember vividly is the social pressures of speaking English. Though these weren't really implemented on me, I do remember them being effective or in place for the students that came from Hispanic or other language speaking backgrounds. Students would make fun of them or tell them to speak right, which was interesting. And as a child, I obviously partaked in this type of rhetoric and would say similar things that today I probably wouldn't say. Thinking about this early vocabulary and language that I used is difficult because it was so long ago and it just makes it hard to remember everything that I used to say or do at school or in the school system. But looking forward to like middle school or junior high, I remember my friend group at the time began swearing. So the first time I remember like actively choosing to swear, not out of anger or accidentally swearing, was in the 7th grade. My friend Hollis was around me and he swore pretty frequently. So I remember that being like a social pressure by my friends at the time that made me feel like I needed to do it just to be part of my group. Which is interesting because looking back now, swearing's like in a social public scenario I don't tend to do because I find it to be unappealing and I don't really like to offend others. But when I was in middle school and junior high, I got joy from pushing boundaries and saying things that shouldn't have been said, and I think many young boys can relate to this based off of my experience as a teacher. Along with this surge of vulgar language, I also started to use grammar and English backwards. So I purposefully used words that people would consider low class. This was probably due to the popularity of Eminem or slang in my school. Words like sup or yo or just short words that wouldn't be as expressive as using more thorough vocabulary. So for me, yeah, middle school and junior high was just a time for me to find my voice and see who I was. In high school, once my friend group and where I stood socially and economically as a student, I think I began to come into who I really was a lot more. I think my first 2 years, I was still in that similar to middle school, junior high mindset where I was still pushing the boundaries or things of those nature because I didn't really know where I belonged in the social hierarchy of the school yet. I was becoming a good athlete, so I went from being pretty low on the ring as just a weird kid that people didn't like to becoming pretty popular by my junior year. And so I had to struggle with finding a new set of vocabulary because I was allowed to say and do more than I was previously. This led to some pretty poor choices from me, but I don't really regret them, but I would never choose the same word choices or vocabulary that I did at that time. I've actually chosen to go back and change my vocabulary from high school because it wasn't very good, and I just think that I can represent myself in a better light. Moving to college, I think this is when my acceptance of different languages and different speaking styles came to light. I became more accepting of other languages, people that speak differently because I kind of had to, since college has a much more diverse pool of students. For myself and my own speaking development, I picked up at my first college probably a worse vocabulary, a worse use of language on my wrestling team, and just at the school as a whole. Using foul language such as swear words was more common and more widely accepted than the school I came from, so I didn't have to hide it as much, which led to kind of a bad habit when it came to talking to people and not swearing. As far as with teachers, I would be more informal, which was strange because I came from a high school where being formal was expected. They had that set of hidden power in place to keep students and teachers in a specific hierarchy that didn't change. The language I used at my junior college, however, was more proper and, in my eyes, higher level vocabulary because I wanted to give off this persona of experience and knowledge because I was working on myself, and I wanted the other people at the school, wrestlers, students, teachers, to see that I was trustworthy, reliable, and had a lot of knowledge. So I was trying to kind of push this persona, which in turn changed the way I used the language and the function it served to give me a higher social power within that community at the time. And I remember it actually working. The teachers worked with me a lot more than they did at Colorado, and they were more flexible. I believe it has something to do with the fact that I was using more widely accepted vocabulary to get to the end objective that I was looking for out of these teachers, and complying with the rules set in place by the school socially to get what I wanted from that experience. Since I've been done with junior college and have moved on to university here at Grandview, I think since my first year here, the way I speak has developed a lot. This is probably due to taking so many different language arts, education, liberal arts courses over the years have made me see and understand different perspectives of language and the way it's used. I remember when I first got here, I didn't really have any friends, so I kept to myself for the most part, but I was outspoken in class and I would speak more. This led to me developing a voice that some people actually don't like. I've been told many times by students in the English department that they thought I was rude or they didn't like me when they first met me. But that's kind of the way things go. People generally don't like me when they first meet me. Maybe it's the way I present or how I talk or the way I talk or what I talk about. But people generally don't like me and then like me once they get to know me a little better. The way this school has helped me develop my language is through classes like linguistics, and this class have taught me the ways that I speak can affect the world and can affect how people see themselves or the way they feel, especially as an aspiring teacher, thinking about these concepts and trying to create equal opportunity for my students to control their own destinies and not force them into a certain social group and expectations when it comes to the way that they use their language. With this all said, I'm excited to think about the way I use language as a teacher and the way that I socially and structurally set up my teaching process and ability to help or hinder my students that I teach. This quote by Fairclough does a good job of teaching us about the different power structures that lie in our social interactions. The quote says, "The way in which order of discourse are structured and the ideologies which they embody are determined by relationships of power in particular social institutions and the society as a whole." Looking at this quote as an aspiring teacher, it makes me think about the ways that I should conduct myself when setting up power structure in my class. For example, we talked about true or right language. Finding a way to steer away from these ideas that can make students feel not accepted or as they have less power, such as incorporating other languages or diverse cultures and experiences into my lessons. This is something I've always tried to do, but now that I've had this class, I think it's shown me why doing such assignments is important and can be helpful in the power dynamic as a whole for those students to not feel like the class is ran on Western, white, stereotypical language, and that's the way that they need to talk to be accepted in my class as a student. The other thing I would like to do is limit hidden power, so like instances of needing to ask me to use the restroom or doing just as I say or doing what they think I want. It will be difficult because I grew up and have been raised in such an environment, and all I know is school systems that run on hidden power and just set in stone power dynamics that we all know. There's a reason movies based in high school have general stereotypes that most people can identify. It's because these social groups, on average, carry similar social value or power as a whole. With that being said, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. It means a lot, and I hope you enjoyed seeing and hearing about my personal experience and the journey I've taken to acquire the language that I have today.